Today is December 28th. Today's quote is entitled, "Let Go of the Past." Whatever has happened in the past is history. Your advancement in Krishna consciousness begins right now. Wow. Have you ever heard the saying, today is the first day of the rest of your life? So, whatever the past was, it doesn't have to be that way in the future. In our japa workshops, we talk about chanting rounds later in the day. And everybody knows that the best rounds are chanted early in the morning. We all have that experience. We all know that, right? And everybody knows that when you chant later in the day, the rounds are not usually as good because there's so much going on, or maybe the evening you're not so wide awake, and you've been working all day, you're a little tired, and so we kind of flip that around in the japa workshop and say, why do we have to believe that our rounds will not be good later in the day if, by circumstance, we have to chant later in the day? Wouldn't it be wiser to think that I will chant good rounds later in the day? So most of us go into japa later in the day with a subconscious thought that these rounds will not be as good as the rounds earlier in the morning. Isn't it a fact? Don't we think that way, most of us? Yeah, they can't be as good as early in the morning because that's Brahma Muhurta, it's auspicious. And so we go into those rounds and we expect that those rounds won't be as good. We don't maybe try as hard because after all, you can't chant good rounds that time of the day. What if we turn that around and we say, no, I'm going to decide now to chant good rounds. Whatever has been my history of the past, my history in the past means whenever I chant rounds at 4 in the afternoon, they're never as good as when I chant them at 5 in the morning. But now, I'm going to make an effort. I'm not going to allow the past to dictate the future. And so when we discuss this in our japa workshops, and this is just one example, you could use many examples, of how something that's repeated itself in the past doesn't have to repeat itself in the future. But when we discuss this in the japa workshops, someone will always say, once I had this amazing japa at 10 o'clock at night. Or the next day someone will come back and say, I applied that principle and it worked. I chanted some amazing rounds, and I've never chanted good rounds at 6 in the evening because of this or that. But today I did it and it was amazing. All because we made a decision that the past doesn't have to equal the future. Now, it's such a simple concept. And although it's simple, many of us don't get it because we're creatures of habit and we tend to think that however things were is how they're going to be. So if we want to make progress, either materially or spiritually, we have to get out of that box of thinking and start to realize that if I apply myself, if I make certain kinds of efforts, then why couldn't I produce better results? There's no reason I couldn't. It's cause and effect. If the causes are better or different, the effects will be better or different. So I just have to change the causes. I have to change the actions. Now, I of course can't say, tomorrow I will be a sannyasi. We're not talking about dramatic changes, but we're talking about overcoming some of the limitations that may not really be limitations, that we just think they're limitations, like the chanting bad rounds at a certain time of day. That was a limitation we put on ourselves because of that experience, that every time we chanted that day, the rounds are bad. So that's the idea. Don't put limitations on yourself because of past bad experiences. Always understand that right now, I can do better. At least I can try. Oh, let's say you had a bad marriage. You're having a bad marriage, and you think, oh, this marriage is never going to become good. Well, it's not true. Many marriages that are bad have become good. Actually, many marriages that are bad have become even better than they were when they were at their height of goodness. Because people understood what they were doing wrong. They started doing the right things. They talked more. They spent more time together. They had deeper understanding of one another. They realized why they were disturbing one another, etc. And all of a sudden, although they've had a bad marriage for so many years, they now even have a better marriage. You realize some people get divorced and they remarry and they have better marriage than when they were younger? Yeah, so it's possible. So the idea of today's quote is, don't just think because something has happened a certain way in the past, it's going to happen that way in the future. Look at our lives. Our lives, the first 20 years of our lives were not very Krishna conscious. And then we changed all that. So we are living proof of this quote. We did something which was in contradiction to our whole past. Didn't we? Yeah. So if we did it then, why can't we continually do that? We can contradict our past. Okay, I haven't been that Krishna conscious up to this point, but why not now I become a little more serious? I can do that. You can do that right now. You don't have to wait for anybody or any encouragement or any 10 years or getting up early. You can do it right now. At this very moment, you can decide, I want to be more Krishna conscious today, from now on, and the rest of my life. And you can start doing things to make yourself more Krishna conscious. It's actually that simple. I know it sounds simple. And the reason it sounds simple is because it is.